The night rain fell steadily, each drop tapping like a metronome on the rusted car hood. Along the winding, deserted road, the headlights pierced the mist like blades cutting through a curtain of darkness. A battered silver-grey sedan trudged through the night, each jolt from the uneven pavement bouncing up through the shoulders of the man behind the wheel. John Thomas, 28 years old, once the visionary CEO who founded Tech Vision, was now merely a shadow of the man he used to be. In the back seat, curled in an oversized coat, a young woman was gasping for air, her face blurred by darkness and panic. That was Amelia White, 24th heiress to one of the largest financial empires in America. But tonight, there was no trace of opulence, no evening gowns, no glittering jewelry, just a small USB flash drive clutched in her palm, the very thing that had made her a target. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Her voice was small, but a quiet steel ran beneath the fear. John glanced briefly in the rearview mirror. "All I know is you jumped into my car as I was about to drive off. If I'd been a minute slower, I might have been kidnapped. Or disappeared for good." She turned her face to the rain-slicked window. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this, but I didn't have a choice." John didn't ask anything further. After everything he had been through, he understood that silence often said more than words. A year ago, Tech Vision, his brainchild, had been swallowed up in a shady acquisition by a major conglomerate. Everything he built collapsed in a matter of weeks. And now, in the middle of a stormy night, a woman he had never met was sitting in the back seat, bringing with her the first glimmer of the truth he'd been chasing. "Turn right up ahead onto that dirt road," Amelia said softly, her voice almost blending into the rain. John nodded and steered off the asphalt. The car slid onto a narrow trail, hidden between thick trees. The headlights only illuminated a few meters ahead before fading into the dense forest. They were slipping deeper into the night, as if stepping backward out of the modern world. "My father bought this place over 20 years ago," Amelia said as the car stopped in front of a moss-covered wooden cabin. "He planned to build an eco-retreat here, but forgot about it. Probably doesn't even remember it exists." They pushed open the creaky wooden door. Inside, dust blanketed everything, but the essentials remained: a table, a fireplace, an old oil lamp, and most importantly, no eyes watching them. John opened his laptop and inserted the USB Amelia had handed him. The screen blinked blue, then displayed a list of folders with chilling titles: secret expenditures, fabricated contracts, Operation Tech Vision. Amelia stepped closer, watching him for a long moment. "You need to know what's going on. If I die, I want at least one person alive to know the truth." John opened a file labeled Operation Tech Vision. A memo appeared, detailed like a military directive: sabotage the server infrastructure, spread false rumors, manipulate media to discredit the company. At the bottom was a signature John would never forget: William Johnson, Amelia's father. He froze. "He's the one who destroyed my career," John said, his voice low, stripped of anger. Only a cold acceptance remained. "I know," Amelia said, eyes fixed on the screen, "and he's done it to dozens of others, mostly people of color, women, or anyone he couldn't control." John closed the laptop, thinking. Then he said something even he didn't expect himself to say. "We need help." Amelia looked at him, surprised by the shift. "You're not going to throw me out of the car anymore?" "I never planned to," he shrugged. "I don't know who you are, but I know exactly who he is." Outside the cabin, the rain thickened, falling in sheets, like watery curtains. In that damp darkness, a black car was parked over 2 miles away, engine and lights off, silent, like a predator lying in wait. Inside the cabin, 2 people from 2 vastly different worlds had joined forces, not because they trusted each other, but because they had nothing left to lose. And together, they had just unlocked a door to a battle whose consequences neither could fully comprehend. The next morning, the sky remained shrouded in leaden grey. A thin mist clung like a damp, mysterious veil to the forest trees. John woke early. He sat at the rickety wooden table in the cabin, holding a cup of coffee brewed from the last instant packet he had left in his car's glove compartment. Amelia was still asleep, curled up on the old worn-out sofa, her face more relaxed after a long, exhausting night. John gazed at the laptop screen, still open. The files on the USB were intact. Specific names appeared repeatedly in the payment logs: judges, senators, journalists, and regulatory directors. William Johnson wasn't just a businessman. He was the center of an invisible power web stretching across every layer of society. The soft creak of the door opening made John turn his head. Amelia was awake. She wore an old denim jacket, her hair pulled into a high bun. Her face was bare, but her expression was sharp. "I think I know someone who can help," John said, setting down his coffee. "Have you heard of Ava Harris?" Amelia nodded. "The lawyer who used to take on big corporations. My father used to call her the mosquito in the boardroom. She was the only one who didn't turn her back on me when Tech Vision went under," John said. "If there's anyone left who's willing to put justice before personal safety, it's her." An hour later, they had left the cabin. The car trudged down the dirt road and back onto the main highway. Every time John looked into the rearview mirror, a chill ran down his spine. The feeling of being watched never left him. Ava's office was on the 6th floor of an old building in the city's heart. A small sign on the door read, "Law Office, Ava Harris, Justice chooses no side." When they entered, Ava was pouring tea. At 42, with short hair streaked with silver and a pair of striking red-framed glasses, Ava radiated a quiet sharpness. Understated, but unmistakably resolute. "John Thomas," she said with a half-smile, eyeing Amelia curiously. "What mess are you dragging me into, this time?" "We have something," John replied, opening his laptop and showing her a summary of the data. After skimming through it for a few minutes, Ava looked up, her expression completely changed. This isn't just criminal evidence. This is a political atom bomb. Do you even realize what you're touching?" Amelia spoke up, her voice steadier than the night before. "I know. But there's no turning back now. My father has to be exposed. Not just for what he did to him," she nodded toward John, "but because an entire system survives on the silence of people like me." Ava set the laptop down and crossed her arms, thinking, "I can't do this alone. We need someone who can handle high-level data without leaving a trace. I know someone, Evelyn Harris. A hacker used to work in government cybersecurity. She's also my cousin." That afternoon, the four gathered in Evelyn's apartment, a small private space outfitted with a wall-sized screen and scattered electronic equipment like a control room. Evelyn stared at the mountain of data with a predator's focus. "Damn, this is the real stuff," she muttered, fingers flying across her keyboard. "I can build a secure platform to store, encrypt, and structure all this. But dumping the files won't be enough if we want to take down William Johnson. He's too smart. We have to make him expose himself." Amelia looked at John. "Do you have any ideas?" John leaned back in his chair, eyes on the ceiling. "To get him arrested, we need to sever every layer of protection, political, legal, media. And we must do it in a way that can't be reversed." Ava nodded. "Which means we need a 3-phase plan. 1, release the evidence. 2, coordinate with investigators. And 3, deliver a public blow strong enough to collapse his credibility." Evelyn chimed in, "I can build a remote trigger system. When Johnson steps in front of the media, we drop the truth package, not through some dry press release, but through social media, internal emails, and live video streams. When the world is watching, he won't be able to hide a thing." Amelia gave a faint smile. For the first time in weeks, it looked like she felt hope. John stood up and extended his hand over the table. "We're nobodies. But if we work together, an empire can fall." One by one, they placed their hands over his. 4 people, 4 reasons, but one shared goal: the truth. And so the plan began, not in a grand auditorium or a corporate skyscraper, but in a modest apartment where the only light came from laptop screens, not the sun. 3 days later, the shroud of night had given way to the rush of urban life. But inside a small apartment, tucked away behind glass towers, a plot to reverse the power balance was slowly taking shape. Evelyn sat before a massive screen, her eyes locked onto streams of code racing by. The system is almost complete. We'll be able to release the data simultaneously across more than 50 channels, social media, Wintercorp's internal email system, anonymous tips to media outlets, and Amelia's video. Amelia sat across from her, nodding slowly. She was recording a video not just to expose her father, but to liberate herself. Her voice was steady, each word as heavy as lead. My father, William Johnson, does not just run a business empire. He manipulates justice, buys out the system, and sabotages small businesses, especially those who don't belong in his world. I can't stay silent any longer. Ava watched the video feed from her screen. Short, strong, clear. The story has to come from you. You're the key the public will believe, not because you're his daughter, but because you dare to stand against him. Meanwhile, John was analyzing Johnson's media schedule. He'll be appearing at the press conference announcing the largest merger in Wintercorp's history. That's his moment of peak power, also his most vulnerable. We'll let him get on stage and talk about ethics and vision, Evelyn said, her lips tight and eyes gleaming. Then we bring the curtain down. They all agreed that the press conference would be their final stage. 2 days later, Amelia entered the large auditorium like an ordinary attendee, dressed in a simple business outfit and hair tied in a bun. She came alone with no bodyguards and no spotlight. In her hand was a specially encrypted phone. In her ear, Evelyn's whisper. Backstage camera feed is online. The transmission system is ready, awaiting signal from John. Wearing a dark suit, John sat in the last row of the hall. On his shoulder was a leather bag, not filled with documents, but with a device connected to the building's internal network. He had installed it earlier that morning. Now all he needed was one command. William Johnson took the stage to applause. His silver hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit impeccable. He smiled like a benevolent patriarch of the economy. We're not just acquiring a company, we're acquiring the future. Transparency, integrity, and innovation are the core values of Wintercorp. At that moment, John pressed the button. Every auxiliary screen in the auditorium flickered, then displayed the same message in stark white text on a black background: the truth about William Johnson. Watch here. Audience phones buzzed. Reporters opened their screens. Emails, messages, and videos spread simultaneously. Images of payment records, audio clips of backdoor deals with judges, documents outlining the sabotage of rival firms. And then Amelia's video appeared on the main screen. I'm Amelia White. I will no longer stay silent. These are the proofs that my father has run a systematized network of corruption for over 2 decades. The room fell silent. Johnson spun around to face the technicians. Shut it off now. You can't, Evelyn said into her headset, smiling. The system's being controlled externally. A young reporter stood up. Mr. Johnson, do you deny these documents? Another shouted. What about the recording of the TechVision lawsuit manipulation? Johnson's face went pale. He spotted Amelia standing facing him from across the room. My daughter, she's been manipulated. This is a setup. John rose to his feet too. No, this is justice. Ava appeared from the back, holding up a federal search warrant. A team of agents entered quietly but decisively. One of them approached Johnson. William Johnson, you are under arrest for abuse of power, corporate sabotage, bribery, and tax evasion. Johnson turned to Amelia. You'll regret this. Amelia didn't blink. Maybe, but at least I'm not pretending anymore. As Johnson was escorted out, Wintercorp's stock began to plummet. News outlets broadcast updates non-stop. Amelia's video reached over 5 million views in just 1 hour. And in a small cafe nearby, 4 people sat quietly together. We did it, Evelyn said, eyes still fixed on her screen. John exhaled deeply for the first time in years and felt a weight lift off his chest. It's not over. But this is the first step. Amelia looked up at him. So what now? Are you going to rebuild from scratch? John smiled. No. I will start something new, not just for me, but for people like me. Ava raised her teacup. From now on, we're not just tearing down an empire. We're building a new system. 3 months after William Johnson's arrest, the nation's financial center atmosphere still simmered with quiet upheaval. Major newspapers were racing to dissect the scandal. Editorials spoke of a new generation of entrepreneurs, and John Thomas had become a standard reference. Yet John remained humble. We merely lit the first spark. Justice is a process, not a moment. In a sunlit office one morning, John stood before a white wall where the blueprint for a new project was pinned Horizon Technologies. In the design, small circles symbolize emerging startups interconnected like a neural network. Not everyone needs saving, he told Amelia, but everyone deserves a fair chance. Horizon was a business model, a tech incubator for founders from overlooked communities, people of color, women, the formerly incarcerated, and individuals with disabilities. Instead of begging for capital from exclusive venture funds, they were guided, funded, and given fair profit sharing, not out of pity, but because of real capability. Amelia was now the director of the Justice for Business Fund, a foundation she rebuilt from what remained of her father's assets. Under her leadership, the fund financed companies that Wintercorp had once destroyed as a form of restitution. I spent 24 years not asking questions she shared in an interview. Now I'll spend the rest of my life asking the questions I once avoided. Who is being excluded? Who needs a hand up? And what can I do about it? After her critical role in the media campaign against Johnson, Evelyn Harris now led Horizon's cybersecurity division. She recruited talent once labeled as troublemakers, white hat hackers, dropouts, ex-offenders, and trained them to become professionals. Ava Harris continued as Horizon's senior legal advisor and was appointed coordinator of a community legal network dedicated to shielding startups from corporate legal manipulation. One late evening, the four reunited for the first time since the explosive press conference. "Look at us now," Evelyn said, sipping ginger tea. "From a rotting cabin in the woods to an office that overlooks downtown. But it's not just a building," Ava added. "We've made a real impact, not through empty promises, but through every investment, every hire." Amelia turned to John. "Do you think—" "My father is watching us." John was quiet for a moment. "Maybe, but now he's powerless. And if he is watching, I hope he sees that this real power isn't money. It's the ability to create change." At a low-security federal prison in western Colorado, William Johnson sat in a communal lounge, staring at a small television. He had lost everything, his fortune, reputation, and allies. But his eyes still clung to a stubborn pride. The program on screen was called New Leaders, a special feature on Horizon Technologies. John Thomas's face appeared with rows of young startup founders behind him, a new generation. "That guy," Johnson muttered, "he used to be a failure." An inmate nearby chuckled. "And now you're watching his show. In prison." William didn't reply. His lips tightened. A flicker in his eyes went out. At an international summit on equity and entrepreneurship, John delivered a keynote. "The system doesn't always intend to work against you, but it was designed to serve people who look, speak, and come from the same places. Our job is to redesign that system." The room rose in applause, not because he spoke beautifully, but because they saw a future that finally felt possible. A few days later, at Horizon's headquarters, a young black student knocked on John's office door. He held a portfolio in one hand, eyes lit with hope. "I don't have an MBA, but I have an idea. I used to sell snacks on that street corner for 7 years. Now I want to build an app to help people like me." John smiled. "Then that's where we begin." As night fell, John and Amelia stood on the rooftop. The breeze was soft, and the city lights pulsed like the steady heartbeat of a living organism. "Do you ever wonder, what if I hadn't jumped into your car that day?" Amelia asked. John looked off into the distance. "I do. But I also wonder if I hadn't stopped. Who else would have? We all make choices," she whispered. "And those choices John nodded, become the things no one believed were possible. The Horizon building was no longer just an office. It had become a symbol. Each day, dozens of young startup teams walked through the frosted glass doors, etched with a rising sun logo, carrying hope blueprints, plans, and the lingering wounds of a system that had once excluded them. John Thomas entered the small auditorium within the building where a new startup selection round was underway. On stage stood a young Native American woman in her early 20s, presenting an app model designed to help upland farming communities access urban markets. She spoke in English, but occasionally slipped in a few native words. No one in the audience minded in this space. Differences weren't corrected, they were celebrated. Beside John was Evelyn monitoring the security system, while recording evaluations for the review board. From across the room, Ava gave a subtle nod. The legal team was ready with advisory packages should this startup be selected. Amelia from the upper floor looked down through the glass. She wasn't directly involved, but she followed every move. She had learned how to step back so others could step forward. That afternoon, the core team gathered in the large conference room. A list of selected projects approved for funding and mentorship was on the digital board. We've got representation from 5 ethnic groups, Ava reported, 3 all-female founding teams, 1 LGBTQ+ group, and 2 led by formerly incarcerated individuals. This is a major milestone. More importantly, John added, they all have real skills and viable solutions. We're not doing charity. We invest because we believe they can change the world in ways the old system never allowed. Evelyn skimmed another report. On the resistance front, leaks suggest that some of Johnson's former associates are regrouping to launch a counter-project. They're not done yet. Amelia nodded quietly. The more successful we are, the stronger the pushback, but we're ready. Meanwhile, a new glass building had emerged in another state, mimicking Horizon's colors, architecture, and logo. But instead of welcoming the previously marginalized, it had a rigid selection process, investment viability rankings, and an opaque ownership structure. Behind it was Charles Dunning, a former strategic partner of William Johnson. After the scandal, he vanished from the media, but returned with an aggressive publicity campaign, branding himself as the face of practical equity in tech investment. John learned about it while speaking with a group of Middle Eastern founders. He didn't seem surprised. They'll imitate, distort, even steal the idea. But what they can't replicate is trust from the community. Ava, however, advised caution. We need to stay one step ahead, not just act on ideals, but defend them wisely. Evelyn got to work on a new layer of digital protection. I'm setting up a transparent evaluation system based on blockchain so every funded startup can track and verify the support they receive. Everyone sees it. No one can alter it. Amelia added, and I'll publish the fund's full operations from selection criteria to financial allocation. They want to wage a media war. We have the truth. A few weeks later, Charles Dunning hosted a major event at his new headquarters. Media outlets were invited to the lavish ceremony with lights, DJs, and celebrities as brand ambassadors. However, one day later, an independent investigation backed by Ava's community legal team was published. Dunning's project lacked an investment advisory license, had non-transparent funding sources, and showed signs of money laundering. Horizon said nothing. They didn't have to. That same day, a young startup from Horizon was acquired at a record-breaking valuation led by an international fund. The media made the comparison themselves. We don't need to fight with noise, John told a gathering of new founders. We let the work speak. The meeting ended with a special ritual. Each person was handed a piece of wood from the original cabin where John and Amelia once hid, since dismantled, but every fragment preserved as a token of inspiration. This is where it all began, Amelia shared. Where we didn't know what was coming, only that silence was no longer an option. That night on Horizon's rooftop, the city lights glittered below. John stood beside Amelia as he had many times before. You think this is the peak, she asked. No, he said, this is only the first base camp. But this time, we're not climbing alone. She smiled, her eyes soft. "These hands," John whispered, looking down at the floor below where teams were still working late into the night. "They'll rebuild the world." Horizon entered its second year of operation, but the energy within remained as fierce, resilient, and full of aspiration as on day one. John Thomas was no longer a stranger to the world. At international tech conferences, he wasn't just mentioned as a founder. He was recognized as an ecosystem architect for those once pushed to the margins. In an entrepreneurial skills workshop, Horizon in the Bronx, hosted, John walked in with no entourage or cameras. He quietly listened to a group of students, people who had dropped out of school, been incarcerated, or lost jobs due to their background. One young man stood and asked, "What do you think when they call us misfits?" John smiled. "I was once called a failure, but that label only sticks if you carry it with you. You have the right to rename yourself." The room went silent, not out of awe, but because those words struck at the root of a doubt too many carried but couldn't name. Meanwhile, Amelia sat with Ava at the Equality Foundation headquarters. They were reviewing candidates for the following year's grant scholarships. One name made them both pause: Malik Reynolds, a former programmer forced out of his old company for challenging internal discriminatory policies. He applied to Horizon before, but didn't make it past the first round, Ava recalled. "He did," Amelia responded, "but when the system isn't flexible enough to understand the outsiders, it's on us to open the side door." Malik was invited to Horizon the following week. He couldn't hide his surprise when John personally greeted him in the mentoring room. "I didn't think I'd get another shot." "You weren't ready the first time," John said bluntly, "but the fact you didn't give up is what made me remember your name." Malik walked out with a new plan, a dedicated mentor, and a spot in the 6-month accelerator program. Once again, Horizon proved that a door might close the first time, but never permanently. Soon after, Horizon launched a community inspiration initiative called Next Voice, a platform where those once excluded from the stage could now share their journeys. At the launch ceremony, John didn't say much. He recounted the first moment he saw Amelia trembling in the back seat of his car. "I didn't know who she was, just that someone needed help, and I thought, if more people chose to help instead of asking, 'Who are you?' maybe we wouldn't need places like Horizon." The entire room applauded, not because he was a hero, but because they saw themselves in that story. Horizon officially expanded into 3 new countries in its second year: Kenya, Colombia, and Vietnam. Each office was led by local leadership trained by Horizon's founding team. There was no imposition, only listening and co-creation. At the Nairobi branch's opening, a young Kenyan founder said, "We don't need people to come and save us. We need a place that believes our dreams are worth investing in, like any other." John stood behind the stage, smiling eyes glistening. Amelia held his hand and whispered, "We're not alone anymore." At the end of the year, the Horizon founding team reunited at a rebuilt cabin, a replica of the one where it all began. No more moss, no more dust. But the spirit remained: simplicity, roots, and remembrance. Evelyn brought a new blueprint for the decentralized governance system for the global Horizon network. It allowed every branch full autonomy as long as they upheld 3 core values: equity, transparency, and community service. "We're not trying to build another empire," she said. "We're building an ecosystem anyone can replicate." John nodded. "And that only happens when we're willing to step back so others can step forward." Amelia looked around at the familiar faces. They had weathered storms together. She spoke quietly. "We were once the ones left out. Now we're the ones leading." Snow began to fall outside the cabin, softly, steadily, like a silent blessing. March arrived, and New York was as temperamental as a child waking from sleep. The last traces of winter snow lingered as spring sunlight crept onto the sidewalks. Inside Horizon headquarters, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Today was the special event, the Catalyst Summit, the first conference gathering successful founders who had risen through Horizon. Amelia moved through backstage areas, checking lighting projectors, the stage and live stream setups. She looked like a TV producer, but her gaze lingered on the faces of the ones who once sat in grant request chairs, now standing here as keynote speakers. John waited in the guest lounge. On the table was the summit schedule with names he'd marked to speak with privately. Malik Reynolds, now CEO of a fintech company valued at $40 million, Soraya Huyn, founder of an education platform for immigrant communities in California, and especially Farah Kay, once expelled for wearing a headscarf, now an AI advisor to 3 African governments. The event began with a short video. On the screen appeared images of the old cabin, Amelia's confession clip, the moment William Johnson was handcuffed, then gradually shifted to footage of Horizon offices across the globe, small startups testing products and young learners sketching app ideas on whiteboards. A voiceover said, "From the place that once was a wound, they created a circulatory system. No one came to rescue. They came to build together." The room rose in a standing ovation as John took the stage. He wore a simple suit, no tie, carrying the same down-to-earth aura he always had. But now his eyes held more weight of someone who had seen both triumph and the burden of leading. 3 years ago, he began, "I thought justice meant bringing a bad man to court. Now I understand that justice also means giving thousands of good people the chance to prove their worth. And that, no one can do alone." The room went still quiet, attentive. We've shown that a fair ecosystem isn't just a slogan. It's a viable model. But let's not fool ourselves, the old system won't collapse. It simply steps back to regroup. And when it returns, the question won't be whether we're ready, but how many others we've helped prepare to stand beside us. After his speech, the program continued with panel discussions, breakout workshops, and a tech exhibition. Evelyn stood at a booth showcasing a blockchain-based transparency system, guiding a group of tech students from Nigeria. Ava took the stage alongside 3 young lawyers from different countries, sharing insights on building legal networks that protect startups from corporate manipulation. In a quiet corner, John reunited with Farah. The once small girl now stood tall, eyes blazing with determination. "You taught me that intelligence shouldn't be confined by convention," she said. "No," John replied. "You proved that yourself. I just showed you a crack. You made it a path." The Horizon founding team gathered on the rooftop for an evening private session. A world map was spread out. Green dots marked where Horizon had already reached. Red dots showed where they hoped to expand in the next 3 years: Bangladesh, Syria, South Africa, and rural regions in the American Midwest. "What are we building exactly?" Evelyn asked, half seriously, half philosophically. John looked at the map, then turned to them. "Not an empire, not a brand. We're building fires so that from the ashes of what once was injustice, a network grows, of people who know they're not alone." Amelia added, "And each of those people will spark another flame. No more waiting for light from above. They become their sun." 1 week later, Horizon officially launched Fireseed, a fund for individuals who didn't qualify to start companies but had ideas to serve their communities. But there were no balance sheets, no MVPs. Just a written commitment and the mentorship to go with it. John awarded the first grant to a single Puerto Rican mother who wanted to create a mobile library model for children in low-income housing. She teared up, not because of the money, but because for the first time someone had asked her, "What do you need?" to begin. A new spring was on the horizon. From the ashes of a fallen empire, green shoots were rising, and fire was no longer something to destroy, but to warm and to light the way. Nearly 6 months after Fireseed launched, Horizon had received over 1,000 pledges from around the world. Not business plans, but pleas, dreams, and handwritten letters from people who had once been rejected. People turned away simply because they didn't speak the language of investors. John Thomas sat in the Horizon reading room, a quiet space designed like a library with wood-paneled walls, warm yellow lights, and soft fabric armchairs. In front of him were dozens of letters, including one from a 16-year-old boy in Jordan who wanted to build a translation app so his grandmother could read books from other countries. No profit model, no growth projections, Just one sincere question. If I know nothing about startups but want to help someone, can I still begin? John folded the letter, his eyes stinging. He knew Horizon was getting closer to its most actual mission, erasing the line between those who could do and those who were never let in. Amelia stood on stage at a TEDx event in Seoul, South Korea. She wore a white blouse, her hair neatly tied back, and spoke with calm clarity, her gaze steady on the audience. When I was a child, I thought the world was divided into two types of people, givers and takers. But when Horizon began, I learned this sometimes: all a person needs to change their life is a door. Without a guard, the auditorium went silent for a few seconds, then erupted in applause. Her words quickly spread online, becoming Horizon's unofficial motto, a door without a guard. At Horizon's headquarters in Colombia, indigenous teenagers built a remote learning platform in their native language. During a private team presentation, one 14-year-old boy struggled as he nervously tried to address a foreign guest. Evelyn, seated among the mentors, saw him stumbling, unable to pronounce the word entrepreneur. She stood, walked onto the stage, and took the mic. "You don't need to say the right word. You need to do the right thing." The room went still, then burst into applause. The boy smiled, eyes glistening. One evening, John and Amelia sat in the executive boardroom. On the wall was Horizon's 5-year expansion plan. Amelia turned to the final page and asked, "Have you thought about stepping back?" John looked at her pensive. "Many times, but then I realized if I step back, someone else might step in to guard the door again." Amelia nodded, then pulled an envelope from her bag. "Someone wanted to thank you." Inside was an old photo, the original cabin taken on film, yellowed at the edges. On the back, handwritten words read, "Thank you for not closing the door." No signature. By now, Horizon was no longer an organization. It had become a movement. In every country, those once given a chance were now offering chances. No one needed to call it Horizon anymore. They named their initiatives as they wished, but all shared the same roots: the belief that potential did not race residency status or certificate requirement. In a village in Senegal, a startup center called Lueur was founded. In the American West, a network of young engineers formed, hands open. And in Vietnam, a Hmong girl created That PGO, a group teaching introductory programming in the local language to middle school students in the mountains. None of them asked Horizon for permission, but all sent a shared message back: "We've opened the door." That summer, John and Ava visited a small school on the outskirts of Cape Town where a group of students had turned an old classroom into a podcast studio to share real-life stories. One student asked John, "Do you still dream?" He smiled. "I used to, and I got punished for it." And now John replied, "Now I don't dream alone anymore." At the end of summer, John stood before hundreds of core members worldwide during Horizon's Global Internal Summit. No stage, no microphone, just one large circle. He spoke. "We began with a cabin, a USB stick, and a runaway mission. But the miracle wasn't in escaping anyone. It was that we didn't go on to recreate the same old power structures." He looked around, then lowered his voice. "The door is open now. Our mission is no longer to guard it, but to walk away so others can walk on their own." Morning in Nairobi glowed with sunlight. John Thomas stood by the railing on the second floor of Horizon Africa's office, looking down at the courtyard where a group of kids were assembling a model solar-powered water filtration device. None of them was older than 16, and none held any degree that the world would recognize. Beside him, Evelyn was checking messages from the Fire Seed system. "We just received a proposal from a boy in Syria," she said. "He wants to build a temporary Wi-Fi network in conflict zones using scrap electronics and recycled energy cells." John nodded. "Assign him a mentor. No need to wait for protocol." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you afraid people will accuse us of favoritism?" "We didn't build Horizon to follow old rules," he replied. "We're here to show others some things don't need permission." In Paris, at a roundtable on the future of global entrepreneurship, a representative from a significant financial conglomerate spoke out against Horizon. They're promoting chaos. Investment systems need structure. They need oversight. You can't just run on emotion and deity and personal belief. Amelia, seated in the front row, smiled faintly. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped onto the stage and said, "What structure allowed a startup headquartered at the base of a hill, with no collateral and no payroll, to transform an entire indigenous agriculture ecosystem?" The hall went silent. She continued, "Call us chaos if that means no longer needing permission to dream. No longer needing to prove worth before being heard. No longer asking who allows us to begin." In a suburb of St. Louis, Malik hosted the first gathering of a new mentor group. They were all once considered failures: a bankrupt entrepreneur, a teacher fired for unorthodox methods, a nurse who refused overtime to care for her child. "None of us were invited," Malik said, "so we showed up. No one called us experts, so we redefined expertise with outcomes." A month later, Horizon received an invitation from the World Economic Forum asking for a representative to speak at a special session on equitable innovation. John declined. Instead, he submitted a video clip of the Jordanian boy who had written about the translation app, speaking with his peers about his demo prototype. No stage, no applause. But the video went viral with over 10 million views. At Horizon's headquarters in New York, Ava organized a closed-door discussion among former lawyers, politicians, and activists who had left the system out of lost faith. The topic, "How do we protect those no longer playing the old game?" Someone asked, "What do we do when they don't sign contracts, don't have legal counsel, and follow no defined model?" Ava smiled gently. "We build new legal frameworks just as they build a new future, and this time no one needs to ask for permission." That night, John and Amelia sat in the office, looking out over the city. The lights reflected in their eyes like a constellation of possibilities. "Do you see it?" Amelia asked. "See what we've lost control?" John laughed. "That was the point from the beginning." They sat in silence a moment longer until Amelia added, "Tomorrow, when someone starts something small from a street corner, a backyard, or a garage without waiting for approval, we'll know we got it right." John nodded. "And we'll also know Horizon no longer belongs to us. It belongs to the world." 3 years after William Johnson's conviction, a group of high school students in Lagos held a small workshop on social innovation. They played the video of the Jordanian boy, then shared the story of a Hmong girl in Vietnam who taught her village how to code using old cell phones. No sponsors, no corporate backers, just a whiteboard, a few plastic chairs, and dozens of eyes lit with fire. In one corner of the room, a handwritten sign read, "Every great thing was once small. Start here." On the other side of the globe, John was packing up his office at Horizon's New York headquarters. He was stepping down as CEO, not because he was forced to, but because he knew it was time. "I've done enough to open the door," he told the board. "Now it's time for others to step through and lead." His successor was a young woman of Mexican descent, one of Fireseed's earliest fellows. When asked if she feared the weight of the role, she smiled, "I don't see myself continuing anyone's dream. I'm opening my own." Amelia raised her glass at a small farewell gathering alongside Ava, Evelyn, and the other founding members. No long speeches, just memories and glances that needed no words. "I still remember when you jumped into my car," John told Amelia. "I didn't know if it was the beginning or the end." "Both," she replied. "The beginning for us. The end of everything that once held us back." Months later, Horizon still ran. Fireseed still granted funding. Offices across 3 continents had doubled, but no one mentioned John Daly anymore, and that was the truest sign of success. He spent his time writing not a memoir, but an open manual sharing how to build communities without hierarchy, without gatekeeping. A roadmap for anyone who wanted to begin, without asking permission. One afternoon, at a casual meetup of next-gen founders, a girl asked if I were to start today with nothing but 2 empty hands and an idea. "What should I do first?" John answered without hesitation. Don't ask for permission. Don't wait for validation. Just begin. And if someone closes a door on you, build a new one. At the end of the year, during Horizon's 5th anniversary celebration, an anonymous letter was read aloud. I used to be the kid sitting behind the door. Now I've built 3 tables, and I've invited others to sit with me. No one knew who sent it, but everyone understood. The end is not a stopping point. It's merely a reminder. You've come far enough for someone else to take the next step, and Horizon, once just a journey, had become 1,000 more.